Here is the Sackler VP during the opioid. She was the Sackler vice president during the opioid crisis. Purdue Pharma, they basically off-label marketed this drug to doctors by telling them, and they had all sorts of very, very, very aggressive programs in which to sell this. They basically told doctors, like, this is a special formulation. It's not going to be, you're not going to have to worry about addiction and stuff like that. This is a drug that was developed to treat people who were going through the worst of the worst pain, where the idea of becoming addicted to opioids was completely secondary to the massive chemo they were going through, or the acute injury they had suffered, or whatever it was. And of course, you'd have to be very careful in administering this to the people and monitor the patients and whatnot. But instead, what they did said, well, we've developed a way in which it's time released in such a way that it doesn't become addictive. And you can basically prescribe it for anything, But they have no idea how they could have avoided this. They knew the numbers they were sending out the door. They knew how much they were producing.
They knew that specific towns in rural areas were having shipments that were, massive, basically dwarfing other areas because they were being prescribed to basically everybody in the town.
Here is, this is during the hearing with the Democrats House Oversight Committee. This is Representative Maloney from New York.
So I'll ask you again, will you apologize for the role you played in the opioid crisis?
I have struggled with that question. I have asked myself over many years. I have tried to figure out, is there anything that I could have done differently, knowing what I knew then, not what I know now? And I have to say, there is nothing that I can find that I would have done differently based on what I believed and understood then.
I mean, this is the functional equivalent of me walking down the street, seeing a massive crane that is holding steel girders and saying, I'm going to hop in there and I'm going to drive this thing around and see if I can't land that steel girder on top of that 40th floor of that building that they're constructing.
But then you need a financial incentive to do it as well.
And yeah, no, somebody says to you, yeah, exactly. Here's $5,000. Go see if you can do that. And I hopped in there and okay, I dropped the steel. I killed 100 people, but I have racked my brain with the knowledge I had at that time of how to drive a crane. And realizing at the time, I thought I could do it. I just why would it be that different from working like a lawn tractor or something?
But I mean, it was like the idea that they're pretending like they feel remorse and they're just like, what could we have done? They lied to the DEA about having a drug diversion program or some sort of addiction program that they never actually had. They misrepresented their manufacturing numbers to the government. They violated federal anti-kickback laws by paying doctors to get them to write more prescriptions. And they used electronic software to influence more prescriptions of OxyContin. So you can couch it in, this is a profit motive. But the first part, the fact that they were pretending like they had this program in order to reduce addiction that they didn't have, then you know how addictive it is. And so I don't really buy your crocodile tears. And Ayanna Pressley was admonishing all of these Purdue Pharma executives there. But and yes, they're going to have to pay back millions of dollars, and they pled guilty. But people will never get their family members back.
No.
So I don't feel sympathy. And this is malfeasance, corporate malfeasance of the highest order. This is ExxonMobil knowing in 1973 or whenever it was that their product caused climate change and then continuing to produce and hide that information. This is on that level. And so I don't really feel anything. In fact, I feel extreme anger when the CEO comes out and tries to pretend like they were willfully, or they were ignorant.
I mean, the question was, do you apologize for, the role you played? And she said, well, I've racked my brain as to what we did, and I can't see how we could have done anything differently.
Right.
So it's like they don't even feel bad about it, ultimately.
No.
Maybe not lie about the addiction program you had, just in order to hide how addictive they were.
Right. And they also don't want there to be any thing that could be perceived as admitting any wrongdoing in such a way, because they're all going to face maybe, if not civil charges, but maybe criminal charges. Here's Katie Porter during that House Oversight Committee talking about the Sacklers are the owners of the Purdue Pharma.
I have some questions about the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, Section 4A2. Before I came to Congress, I was a law professor and wrote this book, The Law of Debtors and Creditors. It's a bankruptcy law textbook. And UFTA Section 4A2 makes it a fraudulent transfer to remove money from a corporation without receiving any value. And we all agree Purdue didn't get anything out of giving the money away to the Sacklers. That didn't help the company, it helped the Sacklers. And the second factor is that when they took the money out of the company, what was
pause
left?
it for a second. I'm sorry. I should have just explained the context. So the company goes bankrupt. And what bankruptcy does in Chapter 11 is protects you from the creditors, right? And so you owe money to people, whatever. Maybe you got a loan on your factories that are producing your poison that you're sending out to people. And the idea is, what the Sacklers did is, because what they want to do is, hey, they have the shell of a company. There's cash reserves in there. How do they get that money into their pockets? Leave the carcass of the company there, empty. It goes bankrupt. Who cares? They don't care, because here's the dirty secret. People set up companies, particularly when they're to make money.
The kind of people who
they're like,
would be drug
Purdue Pharma, and we grew up with it, and like we had the sign, and like it was a family-run business. They'll take the $10 billion.
Stand where we would hand out heroin, and then decided to make it more palatable for people.
So you've got a law professor who knows bankruptcy law and is talking about the Sacklers having withdrawn, essentially extracted from their company $10 billion of those that. I don't know if I would call blood money, because that's not what happens when these people OD and die, but let's call it blood money.
Pretty much.
They take that money out of the company, and they just accidentally, they sadly for them ran into a bankruptcy law professor who knows that transfer is illegal. But here we go.
From a corporation without receiving any value. And we all agree Purdue didn't get anything out of giving the money away to the Sacklers. That didn't help the company, it helped the Sacklers. And the second factor is that when they took the money out of the company, what was left reasonably could have been believed that the debtor would incur an inability to pay the debtor's debts as they come due. Now, David Sackler wrote this email. Mr. Landau, why are there not fraudulent transfers in this case?
With respect, Representative, I'm not familiar with the bankruptcy code. I'm a physician, and I think there are many lawyers that have the expertise, including Mr. Hubner, who are actively working on the answers to your questions.
But you do understand that you are the statutory debtor in possession under 1107, and you have all the fiduciary duties of a trustee in bankruptcy at this time to recover every last dollar that can be recovered for the creditors in this case. The creditors in this case do not include the Sackler family.
Yes, I do, and I know that there are appropriate individuals. There's a special committee of our board working with the creditors to resolve all of the transfers made from the company since 2008.
Yeah, so the idea is that they know, this is what's going on here. The Sacklers know that it's always hard to claw back money.
Right.
And this guy is the fiduciary, or one of them, who's responsible for overseeing that the creditors get as much money as possible. Now, one of the creditors could ultimately be the U.S. government. The creditors could be cities and towns who are suing the Purdue Pharma for all the billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars they've expended on health services for all the people who are addicted to their opioids, for increased maybe crime that comes from people trying to get money or break into a pharmacy or to buy heroin because it's cheaper than their opioids. There are lawsuits that are ongoing, that have been ongoing, and when you sue a company that's in bankruptcy, they become your creditors. And so they are taking money away and not paying their creditors and pretending there's no money in the company because $10 billion went out the back door to the Sackler family. And this dude's on the hook. He's a fiduciary. He has a legal responsibility to like watch where that money goes. You can't just be like, oh, Tim came in and said it was his money, so I just gave him. I opened up the safe and gave him all the cash. Can't do that. And so I imagine we're going to see something. But I also
she
would
gets
guess,
him on the record, though, saying he's aware of his role.
I mean, I don't know how that stuff is used in any type of like prosecution or in the context of the bankruptcy, but I also know that the idea is facts on the ground. If the money's in their bank account and they go spend it, and I got to imagine Sacklers have a methodology in which to take money from one place and have it go into the ether.
They might be going to Switzerland or Bermuda or the Cayman Islands.
Who knows?
In the coming weeks.
Who knows? But once you get that money out of the coffers of the company, much harder to get back, supposedly. But
Katie Porter, look at that.
She's
progressive in a red district, always doing us proud.
So good. So good.